It's time to discuss some more cancelled albums. If y'all can't tell, I love talking about cancelled, shelved, or altogether lost media, so I wanted to look at some more cases today. Let's get right into it and start off with Victoria Beckham, Come Together and Open Your Eyes. Fresh after the disbandment of the Spice Girls, Victoria Beckham started releasing solo music, which had decent success. Her debut and to date only album, released on October 1st, 2001, which is also my birthday, not that that's relevant to anything, that just makes me happy. It peaked at number 10 on the UK albums chart, and its singles Not Such an Innocent Girl and A Mind of Its Own both peaked at number 6. A third single, I Wish, was planned, but didn't happen, and Victoria was later dropped by her label, Virgin. After this, she signed to Telstar Records and started work on her next album, which she wanted to be more hip-hop inspired than her debut. She worked with Jay-Z's business partner Damon Dash to make the songs, which the executives at Telstar did not like, saying the direction she went in didn't make sense for her. This first iteration of the album, known as Come Together, was shelved despite Victoria's wishes, and the next version of the album, unofficially called Open Your Eyes, would be a primarily dance pop record. The lead single, 2003's Let Your Head Go, is an absurdly underrated song that I actually only discovered this past January, and it's no joke probably gonna end up being one of my most played songs of the year. The track is a dancey Europop banger that Victoria sounds so good on. No shade, but she's not exactly the strongest vocalist, which is why she works really well on songs like this, since it's more about the music itself and the personality that she brings. Let Your Head Go was released as a double A-side with the song meant for Come Together, called This Groove, which is a more low-key but still solid track that managed to peak at number 3 on the UK singles chart. Sadly, this would be Victoria's final solo single, as her label went bankrupt in 2004. The track Mine for Real was scheduled for a summer 2004 release, but this obviously didn't happen, and outside of the very occasional reunions with the Spice Girls, which frankly there may never be any more of, but whatever, it's fine, Victoria's largely stayed out of the music industry, instead focusing on her fashion and other business ventures. The only other song from this time to actually get released in some capacity is Resentment, which Beyonce ended up recording for her 2006 album B-Day. Pretty much all of the tracks from Open Your Eyes and most of the tracks from Come Together have leaked, so we have a good idea of what both versions of her sophomore album would have been like. Honestly, I really enjoy both. Posh Spice doing a hip-hop inspired record actually isn't as corny as you'd think it would be, and the dance pop songs of Open Your Eyes are all pretty solid. If I had to compare them to anything, I'd say Come Together is like Kylie Minogue's Body Language, while Open Your Eyes is like Kylie Minogue's Fever. One is a little more R&B leaning, while the other is more dance leaning, but she pulls off both pretty well. Given how Victoria just straight up doesn't want to remember that she's a queen of pop, it's extremely unlikely we'll ever get official releases of either album. Though who knows, maybe in 50 years someone will make an unreleased Posh Spice anthology with all of her scrapped music. I know I for sure would buy that. Sugababes, scrapped 8th album. While we're on the topic of UK girl groups, and let's be real, one might not on that topic, the Sugababes, at one point, also had 2 unreleased albums. Following the critical and commercial failure of their album Sweet 7 in 2010, the Babes, who now consisted of Heidi Range, Amel Bariba, and Jade Ewan, started work on an 8th album, originally intended for a summer 2011 release. At roughly the same time, the original Sugababes lineup, consisting of Keisha Buchanan, Mutia Buena, and Siobhan Donaghy, got back together and started work on an album of their own. The new lineup's album was reportedly going to be darker and edgier, according to the girls themselves. One promotional single, called Freedom, was released in September 2011, and while it was received fairly well, it didn't make that much noise. At the time, the Babes were harshly criticized for essentially kicking out the only remaining founding member, Keisha, and replacing her with Jade, so pretty much anything they released at this point was inevitably gonna face backlash, or even worse, indifference. Seeing how audiences were growing tired of the group and its many lineup changes, the girls agreed to scrap the 8th album and quietly let things fizzle out. There's not much known about this canned album, other than the one quote they gave about it being darker, tougher, and edgy. If Freedom is anything to go by, It sounds like it would have continued in the heavy electropop direction that Sweet 7 went in, but unless anything somehow leaks over a decade later, we'll probably never know what this original 8th Sugababes album would have been like. Meanwhile, the original lineup, now under the name Mutia Keisha Siobhan, signed to Polydor Records in 2012, where they released their first single together in over a decade, Flatline, which is an amazing track by the way. While the girls had an album completed in 2013, it went unreleased for several years, and much of it leaked in 2017, which caused the group to work on new material. After a long wait, the new album, called The Lost Tapes, was finally released by the OG girls, who by this point had won back the rights to the Sugababes name. While it's amazing we got the album, it's safe to assume it's probably not the exact same record they originally intended to release, due to the numerous leaks and reworkings from over the nearly decade span it went unreleased. Still, even though we didn't get to hear their original vision back in 2013, this is a pretty happy ending regardless. Selena Gomez, Seven Heavens. Originally meant as the follow-up to 2015's Revival, Seven Heavens is the rumored name of what would have been Selena's third solo album. It's believed to be the name because of this Instagram post from 2017, where she was wearing a shirt with that title on it, but we don't officially know if that was going to be the name or not. Additionally, in 2017, she teased new music when she answered a fan's question on Twitter, saying if her new album was a color, it would be a deep blue. The singles It Ain't Me, Bad Liar, Fetish, and Wolves were all released in 2017, to generally very positive reviews and huge success on the charts. They were a little more experimental for Selena, whose discography for the most part is pretty standard pop. Not that that's a bad thing at all, I love her music, but these singles were definitely a little more out there than her previous stuff. It's a little blurry where the story goes from here, as we don't really know much about Seven Heavens, but somewhere between the release of Wolves and 2019's Lose You to Love Me, the darker direction the album was originally taking changed. We don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but what started out as this more experimental, more atmospheric and moodier record eventually morphed into 2020's Rare, which certainly isn't the most upbeat album, but it's not as dark as it was probably gonna be. The 4 2017 singles, along with the 2018 single Back to You, weren't included on the standard edition of Rare, and instead were tacked on as bonus tracks, which hints that they were meant for an earlier version of the album that was more in line with those songs' alt-pop leaning productions. While many songs recorded from 2016 through 2019 were included on Rare, some, like the leaked tracks Bad Guy, Higher or Heaven, Love's Not Over, Stained, and Bad News, didn't make the cut. Going off the admittedly short snippets of these tracks that I listened to, I guess I could see how Seven Heavens may have been quote-unquote darker, but honestly, I don't think it's that far off from what we did end up getting with Rare, especially on the deluxe edition of that album. I'm one of the fittingly Rare stans, so I can't say I'm unhappy with what we did get, but it would have been cool if Selena continued in this more ambience direction. I think she still could if she wanted to. Like I said, it's not like Rare didn't have moments like that, so maybe one day we'll hear more of what Seven Heavens could have been like. Jessica Simpson, Jessica. Before she made her major label debut with 1999's Sweet Kisses, Jessica Simpson recorded a whole gospel album back in 1995 when she was just 15 years old. The 10-track album was going to be released by the label Proclaim Records, but unfortunately they folded before it could be released. Jessica's nanny actually gave her father $7,500 to make the CDs themselves to sell at their concerts, which they did, meaning technically this album, simply titled Jessica, isn't unreleased, but given its extreme rarity due to the nature of its release, it may as well be. The CD was actually used by the family's entertainment lawyer, Tim Mandelbaum, to drum up interest among New York music labels, but of course this wasn't an official mainstream release. I tried looking online to find how much physical copies go for, but I can't even find a listing for one. Going off some comments I read, it looks like they've sold for anywhere between $500 to $700 in the past, which just goes to show how much of a rarity they are. Also, the listing on Discogs says that it was released in 1994, but based on what she said in her memoir, she was still recording it in 1995, so I'm kind of unclear on the timeline. Maybe it was scheduled to come out in 1994? I don't know. Irregardless, it never got a widespread label release. The songs have been uploaded online, so you can listen to Jessica in full, which I'm gonna politely decline. Jessica, girl, I'm sorry, but gospel really isn't my jam. No shade at all, I'm just not super into it, unless it's Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston. I'm sort of cheating with this one since it was technically released, just on a very, very small scale, before Jessica hit the mainstream. It was effectively cancelled since the label folded before it could be released though, so I feel like it counts. And plus, now we all know if we ever see a copy of Jessica at some used record store, we better snatch that shit up, because she is worth a lot of money nowadays. That's it for this video, but let me know some more cancelled, shelved, and lost albums in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.